Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to be looking at how to light a Bunsen burner as well as its proper use. So let's go on and get directly to it. So when you're looking at a Bunsen burner and the setup, there's a couple of basic things. First and foremost is your gas outlets, which typically when the handle is at 90 degrees to the actual gas outlet, that's when it's in off position. When you turn it on, you can hear it hissing. Typically, when you're at a 45-degree angle, that's when you've got the gas just coming on, okay, to the extent that you are going to eventually need it. As far as the Bunsen burner, a couple of basic components to it. First is the gas inlet. You then have a gas control knob. This knob, first thing you need to do whenever you get a Bunsen burner is make sure that's completely closed, and then with thumb and forefinger on the top and bottom, give that one complete twist. So your thumb ends up on top, finger on bottom. That's going to open up the valve inside to the proper amount. The other part of a Bunsen burner is the air intake. This controls the amount of air that's coming into that Bunsen burner, and therefore this is how you would adjust the fuel to air ratio. This is the barrel of a Bunsen burner. You do not ever want to touch the barrel of a Bunsen burner when that Bunsen burner is running, because it will get hot and you run a chance of burning your fingers. The last piece of equipment is some type of tubing. That tubing is what's going to go onto your gas outlet. The other end of it is going to connect into the Bunsen burner. And when you connect this up, make sure it's a nice, tight fit to it. The other thing that you want to make sure of is that you've got it in there where your Bunsen burner will sit flat. So always attach it and then make sure your Bunsen burner sits flat. And that way you don't have to worry about it trying to sit on edge or anything like that. Now, as far as actual lighting the Bunsen burner, we've opened up our valve. We start with the air intake completely closed. And when you light this Bunsen burner, okay, what you always want to do is light the match first, bring it down to ensure that you've got a good flame, and then that match goes to the side of the Bunsen burner. Okay? Then you would turn on that gas. Okay? And again, when you turn on that gas, you'll listen for a hiss, and then back the gas back off. It's about that 45-degree angle, and then you'll introduce that flame of the match to the gas of the Bunsen burner. The reason we like the match first to make sure it's going is so we don't turn on the gas and you build up this nice pocket of flammable gas and then strike a match directly into that pocket of gas and get a little fireball. So always light the match first. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is, as always in lab, you need to have on a lab coat and lab goggles. When you're dealing with open flame, it's even more important than ever to be following safety protocols, because as you heat things, it can pop, get into your eyes, things of that nature. But also, when it comes to lab coats, these particular type, they have an elastic band around the wrist, which are really great because it means that you're not going to have a sleeve hanging down that could possibly get caught by that Bunsen burner flame, right? But when a Bunsen burner is going, we want to always be aware of where that Bunsen burner is, and if it is actually lit and has a flame or not, right? So make sure that when you're dealing with Bunsen burner, no loose sleeves around it, and you try to give it about a foot spacing all the way around, just to ensure that you're not going to end up accidentally catching your sleeve on fire or something like that. So I'm going to light the match. Make sure it's nice and good. Bring it to the side of the Bunsen burner. Turn on the gas. You'll hear it hiss. Back it back off till I don't, and then introduce that flame. Okay. You should get used to putting out a match through a flick of the wrist. A lot of students, what I'll see is they'll get the Bunsen burner lit, They're still holding the match right there, and then they blow out the match, and in doing so, blow out the Bunsen burner. Okay, again, you can't flick a match out, then turn away from the Bunsen burner and blow out that match, so you're not blowing out the flame of the Bunsen burner. Now, as far as this flame, probably very difficult to see. And that's because it's a very pale blue, and you need some type of a dark background. So I've got my sleeve about a foot away from it, but it provides a nice background. And the thing with this flame is that this is what's going to be considered a gentle flame. If we want to increase the heat or the temperature of it, then we open up the air valve and we allow in more oxygen. Oop, opened it too far and it went out. So let me relight this. Close that air valve. Light my match again. There we are. So as I was saying, I can open up that air, and what we'll get is at one stage a small cone, which is going to be a higher temperature than what I had before. And if I continue opening that up, then what I can get is a nice brilliant cone. That's the hottest part of that flame. And anytime that we're doing strong heating, that's the portion of the flame that we're going to need. This is when you're trying to melt metal. It's when you're trying to oxidize something, really trying to drive moisture away from something of that nature. That's when you use this type of a strong flame. If you're needing intermediate temperatures, then about half the oxygen, and then you've got a little bit of a cone, but not much, and then full closure on that air, and you're going to have a very gentle flame. Okay. Well, what we typically use Bunsen burners for, though, is strong heating. And one of the more common labs where we use a Bunsen burner is in conjunction with the crucible. So I'm going to show you how that is done. Now, with a crucible, first thing is that you never want to touch a crucible with your hand, because if you get oil on that crucible, then it can cause uneven heating of the crucible and cause it to break or shatter. So we always pick it up using crucible tongs, which are these. Right? They've got little pinchers on them. And I always suggest picking up the crucible using those pinchers. Others, you'll see they pick it up using the little gap in here. Okay. But that, while it can be done, it's a little more dangerous, because if you squeeze too tightly, then you can crush it, or it will slip up and out, and then it falls off and it breaks. Okay. So we've got our crucible tongs. We have a crucible lid as well. We also pick that up with the tongs. And then we have what's called a clay triangle. And this is what the crucible sits inside of on that ring, which is attached to a ring stand. So I'm going to place that clay triangle. My crucible goes on top of that clay triangle. And then typically, when you heat a crucible, either you're going to heat it without the lid on it, or you're going to heat the crucible with the lid on, but you leave a small little gap. And the reason is you never want to heat a closed system. If I push that lid completely on there, then any air that's trapped there is going to try to escape, and it can blow that lid off of there, and then it falls to the lab bench and shatters. We've got a mess. So we always leave a little bit of an opening, and that allows that steam or whatever to be able to escape. At the end of many labs, though, when you're not wanting it to react with oxygen, that's when you'll slide the lid back onto it completely, and you'll remove that flame. So now you're not heating a closed system, you're letting it cool down without the possibility of it absorbing as much oxygen as it would if you just left it open. Okay? The other thing about crucibles is that we always have to heat them to dryness. Crucibles tend to absorb moisture out of the air very easily, and that can affect things because if you're trying to get the mass of a substance before and after heating, well, if you've got it in the crucible and you massed it beforehand and you haven't dried that crucible, then you're also including the mass of any water that might be trapped in the crucible. So when you heat it and drive off whatever it is from your solid that you're heating, you're also driving off water from that crucible. And as a result, you're going to show more mass being lost than what you really lost. So we always want to heat it to dryness. The way that we do this, when you pick up a Bunsen burner, you only touch it from the base. So I'll pick that Bunsen burner up, and the first thing you do is fan it underneath that crucible. You never go direct heat. Okay, so you're going to do this for about a minute or two to warm it up, and then after that minute or two, then the Bunsen burner can be placed directly under that crucible for direct heating. When you directly heat it, the bottom of the crucible may turn red, and that's perfectly fine. These crucibles can withstand a couple thousand degrees Celsius. But after about another 3 or 4 minutes of strong heating, you would remove that Bunsen burner, blow out the flame, turn out the gas, and then what you're going to do is move that crucible to the last piece of equipment, which I haven't shown you yet, and that is a cooling pad. And this cooling pad allows you to set very hot items on top of it, and it burns the pad rather than burning the lab bench, and allows it to cool down. Okay. Sometimes when you let it cool down, the instructions will tell you to go on and put the lid onto it so it can't reabsorb moisture that you've driven off of it. Sometimes the lab procedure doesn't necessarily state that. But that is how we go about properly lighting a Bunsen burner, using a Bunsen burner, shutting off a Bunsen burner, as well as how you properly handle a crucible and heat it to dryness. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks, and as always, take care.